Hundreds of people got together tonight at Coral Springs City Hall to honor Vice Mayor Nancy Metayer Bowen. The 38-year-old was found dead in her home after police say her husband shot and killed her.
The pillow had burn marks on it, not from a candle, not from an accident. It had been tied with string and pressed against the barrel of a shotgun, fashioned by hand into a makeshift silencer. And whoever made it wasn't panicking. They weren't improvising in a frenzy. They were thinking, calculating, planning what came next, and, more importantly, what no one would hear. When police officers arrived at a home in Coral Springs, Florida on the morning of April 1st, 2026, they already knew something was wrong. Not because of a noise complaint, not because of a fight the neighbors overheard, but because a woman had simply not shown up to work. She wasn't answering her phone. And for someone like her, someone who showed up to everything, for everybody, without fail, that silence was deafening. They entered the home. They moved through the first floor. And then they went upstairs. In a second-floor bedroom, they found the body of Nancy Metayer Bowen, wrapped in blankets and sealed inside garbage bags, like she was something to be disposed of, like she was something to be hidden. She was 38 years old. She was the vice mayor of Coral Springs, Florida. She was the first Black and Haitian American woman ever elected to the Coral Springs City Commission. She had a master's degree from Johns Hopkins. She had worked in Barack Obama's administration. She had campaigned alongside Kamala Harris. And on the morning they found her body, she was less than 24 hours away from announcing she was running for the United States Congress. She never got the chance. 3 spent shotgun shells lay near her body. The silencer pillow was on the bed, and her husband, Stephen Bowen, was already gone, driving his truck through Fort Lauderdale, trying to figure out who he could hand the gun to before police caught up with him. Before we go any further, if you've never been to 3 a.m. Files before, I need you to stop right now. Subscribe, hit the bell, click the like button, because this channel exists for people like Nancy, for women whose stories get buried under headlines and then forgotten. Real people, real victims, real families who are still living inside the aftermath of nights like this. The least we can do is make sure the world doesn't look away. Now let's go back to the beginning, because to understand what happened inside that house, you need to understand who Nancy Metayer Bowen was. And you need to understand exactly who she was becoming. Nancy grew up as the daughter of Haitian immigrants, a first-generation American who understood from an early age what it meant to carry a community's hopes on your back. She attended Florida A&M University, where she studied environmental science, regulation, and policy. She went on to earn her master's degree in environmental health sciences from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. She interned with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. She worked in the offices of former Senator Bill Nelson and President Obama. She spent years doing Haiti relief work. She managed environmental justice programs for Broward County. She responded to Hurricanes Irma, Michael, and Dorian as a member of the Broward County Soil and Water Conservation District. And in 2020, she ran for the Coral Springs City Commission, and she won, becoming the first Black and Haitian American woman to ever hold that seat. For years later, in 2024, she ran again. Nobody ran against her. She won unopposed. This was not a woman going through the motions. This was a woman on a mission. And the entire state of Florida was watching her rise. People who knew Nancy Metayer Bowen describe her the same way, almost word for word, no matter who you ask. She lit up rooms. She had an easy laugh. She was thoughtful, not in a vague, performative way, but in a specific, well-planned way of someone who had thought deeply about people and what they needed. When she'd bump into a colleague working on affordable housing, she'd call them later and say, "What are you working on? Can I help? What can I bring?" She showed up to Little League games. She stood in lines outside Haitian bakeries, asking people about hurricane preparedness. She got on the phone with strangers and walked them through telehealth visits during COVID. Representative Dottie Joseph, who represents North Miami, said Nancy was the kind of politician who actually cared, not someone who showed up because they liked the title. Everything she did was thoughtful, Joseph said. Not nice thoughtful, but well thought out and considerate. She was also someone who carried grief quietly, because in the months before her death, Nancy's personal life had been shattered in a way that most people are not built to survive. Her younger brother, Donovan Joshua Lee Metayer, had been 17 years old when he walked into Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida on February 14, 2018, and survived a mass shooting that killed 17 of his classmates and teachers. He carried that trauma for years. He developed schizophrenia. He fought it. His family fought alongside him. And in December of 2025, Donovan died by suicide. He was 26 years old. Nancy had just buried her little brother. She was still grieving. And somehow, because this is who she was, she kept going. She kept showing up. She kept serving. She kept building. Because that is what people like Nancy do. They don't stop. They pour themselves out for everybody else and trust that the world will be there to hold them when they need it. The question that haunts everyone who knew her is whether anyone was holding her at home. Because on the outside, everything looked fine. Beautiful, even. Nancy posted regularly about her husband, Stephen Bowen. She celebrated their anniversaries with warmth and sincerity. In September 2024, she wrote about the special kind of joy that comes from living in your purpose and being anchored by the love of my incredible husband. In November 2024, she posted a photo of the two of them standing in front of the Coral Springs City Hall seal, marking their second anniversary. Cheers to love, growth, and building a beautiful life together, she wrote. People who saw them together at events, friends, fellow commissioners, their partners, say they seemed happy. No alarm bells, no tension, no cracks in the surface. Democratic State Representative Marie Paul Woodson told the Miami Herald, "We have met the husband several times. Me and my husband. Every function that we go to, sometimes they sit with us. We talk. I never had a clue that something like that would have happened." And that is exactly where the story gets dangerous. Let's talk about Stephen Bowen, because the picture that emerges of him is not the picture of a monster in the traditional sense. He wasn't a man with a violent record. He wasn't a man who'd been arrested for hurting anyone. He had a career. He was a licensed radiologic technologist, certified in 2014, and he worked at Delray Medical Center. He was the CEO of Men of St. Luke, Incorporated, a Hollywood-based faith nonprofit focused on fellowship and discipleship for men who want to live, as their own description puts it, successfully in the eyes of God. He was active in a Masonic lodge. He attended church. He hunted. He posted at the gun range. His Instagram bio, still visible in March 2026, read 3 words: God, husband, armed. Now, take a moment with that, because there's nothing inherently alarming about any one of those 3 things. But in the context of what investigators say he did on the night of March 31st, 2026, those 3 words read like a self-portrait that was always honest about the order of priorities. God, husband, and the tools he used to assert both. Stephen Bowen and Nancy Metayer Bowen were high school sweethearts. They had known each other for decades before they married in 2022. They bought the house together in 2023. The same house she would be found dead in 3 years later. And according to everyone who observed their marriage from the outside, things looked fine right up until the moment they didn't. On the afternoon of Tuesday, March 31st, 2026, Stephen Bowen called his mother. He told her he had experienced a panic attack at work. He said he was going to go home and talk to his wife about it. His mother later told police she had no knowledge of any marital problems between them. Here is what investigators say happened next. Sometime that night, Stephen Bowen retrieved a shotgun. He fashioned a pillow into a makeshift silencer using string and placed it over the barrel. And he shot Nancy Metayer Bowen 3 times. Then, and this is the part that makes your chest go cold, he went downstairs. And he slept. His wife's body was upstairs in their bedroom. And he slept. In the morning, he began dealing with logistics. He wrapped her body in blankets and garbage bags. He moved her to the bed. He arranged to meet a fellow member of his Masonic lodge, texting him with the cover story of discussing an upcoming lodge meeting, and he drove to Fort Lauderdale with a bag containing the shotgun. He texted a city staffer who was trying to reach Nancy. Texted her, she is not picking up. He removed the license plate from his truck. He tried to hand off the weapon. Every single one of those actions required a quiet, deliberate mind, a mind that was working through a checklist rather than collapsing under guilt. And yet, when his uncle finally confronted him and finally asked the question directly, Stephen Bowen's answer was not about rage. It was not about betrayal. It was not about something she had done. He said, I couldn't take it anymore. What couldn't he take? That is the question nobody has answered yet. There's a detail that Representative Jared Moskowitz shared in the immediate aftermath of Nancy's death that I think deserves to sit at the center of everything we know. He posted on the morning of April 2nd, I'm in shock. I was just with her on Saturday. She just buried her brother. She was about to announce she was running for Congress. Nancy was one of the nicest people I worked with, always fighting for her community, always pushing to help. She had such a future. This is terrible. Thursday, the day after her body was found, was supposed to be the day. Her friend Alfredo Olvera, who had known her for nearly a decade, confirmed it to CBS Miami. She was going to announce her candidacy for Florida's 20th congressional district that day. She had support from local leaders, elected officials, family, friends. She was lit up by it. She was ready. And here's the thing about the 20th congressional district. The incumbent, Representative Sheila Cherfus McCormick, had just been indicted by a federal grand jury in Miami for allegedly stealing approximately $5 million in FEMA disaster relief funds and funneling the money into her 2021 congressional campaign. The seat was, for all practical purposes, open and waiting. Nancy Metayer Bowen, the first Haitian-American woman elected in Coral Springs, the Florida Democratic Party's vice chair of Haitian-American voter engagement, the woman who had personally mobilized the Caribbean community for 2 presidential campaigns, was the obvious successor, the person the community had already chosen in spirit. She was not just rising anymore. She was arriving. Now, I want to be careful here, because investigators have not confirmed a motive and Stephen Bowen has not spoken publicly about what drove him to what he is accused of doing. What I'm about to say is not established fact. It is a behavioral pattern that experts in intimate partner violence have pointed to when examining cases like this one, when a highly capable, publicly celebrated woman is killed by the man closest to her, and his only stated explanation is that he couldn't take it anymore. Domestic violence researchers recognize a specific psychological profile. It is not always the overtly controlling man who issues threats and leaves bruises. Sometimes it is the man who smiles at every function, who sits at the table with friends and makes good conversation, who builds a faith nonprofit and posts Bible studies on his Instagram, who has constructed an identity around being a husband, listed second on his bio, right between God and armed, and who, when that identity is eclipsed by his wife's ascending power, experiences a crisis that he cannot name, cannot process, and cannot survive alongside her. The word for what some researchers call this is intimate terrorism by proxy, not a formal diagnosis, but pattern where a partner's psychological collapse gets externalized onto the person they claim to love. What we know is this. The man who was supposed to be her safe place made a silencer out of a pillow so she wouldn't scream loud enough for anyone to help her. On Friday, April 3rd, 2026, 3 days after Nancy Metayer Bowen's body was found wrapped in garbage bags in her own bedroom, hundreds of people gathered on the steps of Coral Springs City Hall. They wore orange and green, the colors of Florida A&M University, the school she loved. They held white candles. They cried. They spoke her name. Representative Jared Moskowitz stood at that vigil and said something that has stayed with the people who were there. He said that had Nancy taken the congressional steps she was planning, she would have won. He and Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz flew a flag over the United States Capitol in her honor. In the days after her murder, her family did something quiet and decisive. They removed Bowen from her name across every social media platform. She is simply Nancy Metayer now, the name she was born with, the name that carried her Haitian roots, her parents' sacrifice, her community's identity, the name that belonged to her before she shared it with anyone. Stephen Bowen was denied bond. He sits in Broward County Jail facing first-degree premeditated murder and tampering with or fabricating physical evidence. His Instagram is still up. The bio still says God. Husband, armed. His lodge is still there. His nonprofit is still registered. His life is frozen at the moment everything broke open, and hers ended. What the Haitian community is sitting with right now, what the broader South Florida community is sitting with, goes beyond grief into something rawer and more difficult. Because Nancy Metayer Bowen had kept her private life private. No one had a clue, they say. No paper trail of prior abuse. No previous calls to police. No public fights. No warning. And that is perhaps the most dangerous thing this case exposes. That the absence of visible red flags is not the same as safety. Linda Parker, the president and CEO of Women in Distress of Broward County, said at the vigil that her organization has seen an uptick in domestic violence cases, including cases where a partner simply snaps without a documented history of prior abuse. No escalation pattern that police could have tracked. No restraining order that could have saved her. Just a man who kept his crisis on the inside until one night it came out in 3 shotgun blasts and then fell asleep downstairs. Jepsy Metellus, who ran the Santlaw Leadership Development Program that shaped Nancy into the public servant she became, said it like this: she was working hard, doing good work, and we never imagined that she was living in this personal hell. We never imagined. That phrase is the heart of this case, because the people closest to her, the people who loved her, who worked alongside her, who sat with her and her husband at event tables and laughed and planned and dreamed, none of them imagined, and neither did she, or so it appears from the outside. She posted anniversary photos. She celebrated 3 years of building and dreaming and loving. She was planning a congressional run. She was still grieving her brother. She was still showing up, and now her parents have buried 2 of their children within 4 months. So let me ask you something, and I want you to sit with this before you answer, because the questions this case raises go beyond who, what, and when. Why do we keep being surprised when this happens to women who seem to have everything? What does it say about how we understand power, that a man can watch his wife become extraordinary and feel that as something being taken from him rather than something to be proud of? What were the conversations happening inside that house that no one outside ever heard? And what I couldn't take anymore actually mean, was it about her ambition, her grief, her brother's death, the stress of their private lives, a coming conversation he feared, or something else entirely that we may never know? And perhaps the most important question of all, how many other Nancys are out there right now, brilliant, accomplished, beloved, living with a version of this that nobody sees coming? I want to hear what you think. Drop your theory in the comments. Tell me what you believe was really happening inside that house. This case is still developing. Stephen Bowen has not yet gone to trial. As new information emerges, we will be back. If this story moved you, if you believe Nancy Metayer Bowen deserved more than to be found wrapped in garbage bags in her own bedroom, then hit that subscribe button right now. Hit the like button. Share this video. Because the best thing we can do for women like her is refuse to let their stories disappear. This is 3 a.m. Files. We don't look away. And we'll see you at the hour when the world sleeps and secrets come alive.